Amsterdam. Now that we define healthy relationship as being 100% authentic, within the belief that the other person and yourself are powerful, do you think this thing should be learned at school?
Yes. I think there's a couple things in the regular curriculum of school that is missing. And one is the understanding that we are extremely social creatures. And so a teacher has an incredible opportunity to imprint, because it's through something called limbic imprinting and limbic resonance. We influence each other. So as a teacher, it's really important to understand that you are imprinting every child in that room with how you do life. And so if how you do life is poor relationships and shut down sexuality and just unexpressed and you're miserable, this is being imprinted to the kids. Whether or not you say anything about it, they get it as an imprint. So because we're social creatures, yes, I do believe it's very important to begin the process of showing children how to communicate honestly and clearly without blame or judgment, how to actually understand their own needs, how to have empathy and really hear someone else, the art of listening and the art of speaking. These things are really essential because we're such social creatures. It is primarily being taught by parents, whether or not the parents want this role. The parents are imprinting their children. But in a school setting, a teacher has a phenomenal opportunity to make things right. So even if the child's home life isn't great, they're spending a lot of hours in a day with this one teacher or several teachers. And so this is ideal opportunity to re-imprint the kids with all these kind of basic human ways of relating. Even if you didn't speak about it, but the teachers themselves understood their own influence. Just by being who they are and relating to the kids in a slightly different way, maybe from more of a compassionate space, the kind of space that would enable children to get that, hey, I'm worth something, and this person sees me as powerful, and my feelings are valid, and what I need to share, my truth, is being heard.
That's the starting point from authenticity, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And this we can teach without it having to be a lesson in how to be authentic. This is taught by the living experience of the teacher. If we can set the stage for a little bit more healthy relating, where we're teaching the kids, you don't have to bargain for love, you don't have to bargain for sexuality, you can express your needs. If nobody likes you, it's okay because you like yourself. These kinds of very simple but yet profound behaviors would set the person for a very good adult experience.
How is it given at this moment, and what you think it should be?
I'll speak for the United States because that's where I've been for the last 10 years. It's really polarized. There are some schools where they're very forward thinking and they bring Planned Parenthood, these sort of sex ed programs, and there's schools that are completely anti-sexual education. They want nothing. But one thing for sure, statistically, in the world, if you look where sex ed is offered, where it's very good, there's less teenage pregnancies and less STIs. Actually, Holland is one of those prime examples for the rest of the world going, well, look what Holland's doing. So I think they're doing a good job in that sense. But what's lacking for me is right now what we're teaching the kids is what I call a functional model of sexuality. And it's how the doctors deal with it and the therapists deal with it and pretty much everyone deals with sexuality is a functional model. This body part does this thing. These hormones do that thing. So you're really looking at a mechanistic type model. But sexuality to a human being isn't just a doing aspect. It's not just body parts doing certain things. There's a deeper purpose to sexuality. By understanding that there's a greater meaning to it, a greater purpose, a greater intent to sexuality, we need to change a little bit how we teach sexual education. So we're not just saying, these are all the diseases, these are all the body parts, this is what happens when they come together.
This is how you use a condom.
Yes, but we also teach you are a human being, your heart partakes in this experience, who you are as an emotional creature partakes in this experience. For example, women's pelvises are extremely refined and very, very attuned and delicate. So they're very sensitive to the environment, to criticism, to fear, to all of these things. It affects the function of the pelvis, but it affects it through an emotional imprint.
When you are in Holland at age of 11, you get sex education. It's merely biological. Any advice, what information should not be left out?
Yeah, that your body is beautiful, it's precious, that pleasure is part of your natural intelligence. These pieces are very important because at 11 you're just at that crux of changing hormonally. And you want to understand your body where you get to delight in her or him instead of feeling afraid of what's coming. Because a lot of girls now are starting to get their menstrual cycles younger and younger. So to establish, at least in that primary education of sexuality, your body is healthy and beautiful exactly as it is, and there's a preciousness to it, there's a sacredness to it. I don't know if they want to use that word, but whatever word they can replace that implies
your body is a temple.
It's important, and they need to actually understand how their body functions, how they relate to themselves, how good it is to have a body. And when they know this, their sexual relationships become much more fulfilling, and they themselves become much more expressed. But we're still not teaching this to kids. And
where you come from, it looks like a very liberated Western idea of sexuality. Here in Holland we have so many cultures living together, going to the same school. Like in one classroom you can have 20 cultures.
Yeah.
How would you deal with those things as a teacher?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So first of all, we need to present things in such a way where we personally don't have a charge. So if the presenter has issues around sexuality or isn't uncomfortable with the topic, they should not be teaching it. Mm-hmm. That's primary. I have been able to speak to people from all different religious backgrounds, all of them. I have been able to speak to all ages, from as young as 11 years old up to the mid-80s, about sexuality. And because I'm comfortable, because there's not a charge around the subject matter, suddenly they say, oh, I feel relaxed about having this discussion. If you come in that room and your sole purpose there is to educate and let these young people know how sexuality works, and that it's a human birthright to have it, and that it comes with responsibility. So these three things, and if you do that in a benevolent way, I don't think you're going to offend anyone.
But some people from some cultures, for instance, don't want kids to know about sexuality. They think it's ridiculous that in Holland we tell things when they're 11, because then it's the time to have fun and play football outside. They should know about these things. And also when they are 15, 16, they think it's not yet time, it should be only...
Okay, well those are definitely true statements for some parents, but what those parents need to understand is their children have access to the internet. And any kid with a cell phone or a computer is learning about sex. Yeah, and they're learning about sex from a pornographic way. They're learning about sex in a degrading way. Children are being educated. They're being educated by the people around them, the magazines around them, the media, their friends. They're obviously, if they're going to school, there's older kids. So you're always overhearing things and seeing behaviors. And so all of this has an impact on a child. And for me, I think it would be excellent to give an opportunity to a child to understand their body in a healthy way, to understand sexual relationship in a healthy way, without having the need to get overly graphic with the kids. It's a sensitive subject, and yet it's at the core of all human beings. Whether you ignore sexuality or you're into sexuality, it's always there. Yeah. But the problem that we're having now is that it's a modern world, the kids have access to everything, so you cannot avoid what's going on. Plus, a lot of kids are suffering from either sexual abuse right at home, and that's confusing, or sexual abuse just close to home. Could be a neighbor, could be I don't know, an uncle or a cousin. And those kids need to understand that's not okay, but this is okay. this is the ugly side of sexuality, but there is a beautiful side of sexuality. And we tend to only focus on the ugly side of things. And even then, there's no outlet for the kids who need to understand, well, what just happened to me? It feels horrible. An outlet for those kids to be able to come forward and say that wasn't okay, and how do I reclaim my body now that I feel like it's been violated? And just having the teacher kind of tuning into what's the home environment around sexuality, because that will give you a lot of insight on the behavior of the child. So if it's a very unhappy situation at home, that child, and the parent says, no, you can't have sexual education, it's too bad, really, because that child is going to suffer. They're not getting the education they need, and the education they are getting at home is an imprint that sex is violent or relationships horrible or whatever it is. So I don't know if it's possible to provide a little bit of just a conversation even with the parents and saying, you know, these programs are designed so that your child can be completely functional as an adult, and we're not teaching them how to have sex, we're teaching them how to relate in a healthy way, and sexuality is a part of that. A lot of parents, I think, would want their child to have a good life. So it's a difficult thing, because if the adults themselves aren't happy and they're not healthy, that's why, in my esteem, there needs to be a parent-child program where the parent is equally learning simultaneously as the child, so that the values that are learned by the child are not destroyed by the values that are in place in the parental behavior. Because what's happening often when children are teenagers is the mother, fathers are also going through a hormonal change. It's a very difficult change for both. Both the kids and the parents are shifting. For the parents to understand what's going on in their own bodies, what's happening in their own hormones, what's happening in their own lives, and then understanding the huge impact and influence they're having on the life of their child. And instead of creating animosity between parent-child, they start to regard each other as allies. And I've done programs like this before, and they've been very successful, because the child stops seeing the parent as some aggressor or someone they need to fight against, and they start to see their mother or father as a human being that has needs, that is also afraid, that is going through their things. And so they form this ally relationship. And when you're an ally with somebody, you're looking out for the best in them. You're having discussions that are different. And you're teaching the parents how to communicate with the child in a way that's not disempowering or disrespectful.
How did school give you sex education, actually? What's your experience when you were a child?
I was 12 years old, and I remember the afternoon like it was yesterday, and there was so much discomfort in the room. And I remember how intensely disappointed I was, because I was extremely sexual with myself. I'd been orgasmic since birth, and there were no answers to my internal questions. I was too shy to ask them externally, but the program was just, it's this body part, you put the condom like this and you get pregnant if that happens, you know. And there was really nothing on pleasure, nothing on delighting in my own body, nothing on even just the difficulties of having a menstrual cycle more on an emotional level. It wasn't talked about. So I felt very disappointed, and I remember going, yeah, whatever, these adults are retarded, and trying to get my own information with whatever means was available to me, which wasn't enough. So my best education came from having friends in their 20s, and I would just ask point-blank questions.
When you were 12?
When I was 12,
14?
I had older friends. I was like, okay, what happens when this, you know, what's going on here, and getting real answers. And I think we used to live more as a little bit more tribally, where we had access to different age groups and different friends and different mentors. And I think kids need mentors, healthy mentors, and mentors that really teach them beauty and self-responsibility and expression.
So that's lucky when you have healthy mentors.
Yes, it's
I
rare.
have some sick mentors.
Yes, but you know, hopefully, as we put these messages out more and more, we create a change, we create a shift, and maybe the kids, like I was, you become an advocate for a voice. Because there's no information, they're going to porn, and porn is one of the worst things to really understand pleasure, how to be sensual, how to enjoy each other's presence. And we're not just talking about intercourse, we're talking the whole act of sensuality between two people. There's no mention of this, and it's so important because it would save a lot of, I deal with the adults that come from not being educated, and they are suffering in their adult life, in their relationships, because they were never taught about sensuality, the importance of slowing things down, the importance of having skill as a lover, and what does that mean. So when I've been privileged to teach young men, they're curious, how do we do this and how do we do that? And by teaching them some real simple things, like breasts are very delicate, you shouldn't, grab them strongly and pull on them. It's not healthy, whatever. So there's ways of communicating, to having an honest human conversation, letting kids know the importance of not being rushed, of not doing it the way they see it done in the movies or pornography, that there is sensitivity, there is delicate tissues to be aware of, and how to become a sensitive, loving, kind, considerate lover. These things, I think, are really crucial, and they're being left out, and it's causing a lot of damage in the long run. Whether or not parents are happy that kids are getting educated, just look at music videos. That's how your kids are learning how to have sex. Unfortunately, recently I had a friend whose child is in jail because he's 17 and has charges for having sexually assaulted a young girl in a party. And this kid is amazing. I know this young man, but his only sex education is rap videos. This is a direct result of poor education. That's all it is. It's kids that are not getting the other side of the picture, because they are getting a picture. They're just not getting the whole picture.
Okay. Why are we so afraid of this pleasure?
It's an imprint. It's something it's a learned behavior, because if you really look at young kids, they don't have it. We're not born with shame. We learn shame. So thankfully we can unlearn shame. And shame serves no purpose. What we want to teach instead of shame is ownership and responsibility. So here I have this pleasure body, and I understand the boundaries. Adults shouldn't be touching me. I shouldn't be self-pleasuring in public places. Just understanding kind of good social behaviors, really. And then also being able to discern right relationship and right timing. These are the things we want to teach kids, not shame, because we're teaching kids shame purely to keep them safe. That's really the intent in the long run. I was lucky where I had parents that didn't shame me, but they definitely taught me boundaries, because I was that kind of child that would publicly just do whatever I wanted to do. And I had to learn early on, the world isn't all relaxed. So I don't need to shut down, but I need to actually go do this in the privacy of my own room. And adults should never touch me. If an adult touches me, to tell my parents right away. And I was always told, make a lot of noise, scream, hit. Like, I was told what to do if these things would happen. And I was attacked as a young girl. I was 12 years old, and an adult tried to rape me. And he threatened my life and the whole thing. And in the moment that he touched me, even though he threatened to kill me if I made a sound, I screamed the living bejesus. And I ran like a crazy woman. And throughout my teen life, I was again attacked a few other times. And I punched, I broke noses, I had this reaction that was instinctual. And what we're doing to human beings now is we're breaking the instinct. But if you look at any animal, an instinctual animal, they will not let you hurt them. They'll react. But when you break someone's instinct, and that's what shame does, you can't react anymore. There's no more self-preservation. You just stop. And so if we can teach the kids very early on that their instincts are good, you have a lot more chance. Now, of course, there's situations where that just can't happen. But as best as we can to say it's okay, and this is not okay, these behaviors are not okay, and this is what you do.
What can we do as a teacher?
It would be really ideal to even have a beautiful little simple book that would explain, like, okay, so you had this experience, it's not okay, and then taking the child not just to a place where they're functional with the trauma, because that's what our society does, we're very good at this, We're good at taking someone from a traumatic experience to becoming a victim of that trauma. We say, okay, that wasn't okay, this was wrong, and then we kind of stay in this victim place. And we don't yet have in place a way for the child to understand that that moment in their life doesn't have to define their entire life. And there's ways of re-imprinting the cellular memory, so just gentle ways of doing that. And understanding that there's a whole other side to them that was untouched, nothing was taken from them, and these things have yet to come out and emerge. But what's difficult is when there's abuse in place, and you're so in your formative years, is you're limbically being confused in the imprinting. Something gorgeous and natural becomes frightening and horrible. And that imprint will have to be re-imprinted at some point. And it cannot really be from a teacher or a parent. It's going to happen, A, by them choosing and recognizing they need it for themselves, and B, them manifesting a partner that can re-imprint that moment because they're loving and respectful.
But when you are misused,
often you attract the same.
Yeah.
So that's why I said that this manual, it would be great to say what happened wasn't okay, and this is how we're going to move you forward. Right. It's lacking, and we're insensitive because I said earlier, being a sexual social creature is at the fundamental level of being a human being, and it's the least spoken to and least addressed in our society. We do not have the resources or interest at this point. But we're starting to discover that in order to really express your full potential as a human being, that means your full intelligence, your full creativity, and just your birthright of feeling good, these things are related to what's going on in the pelvis of the person. So if there's trauma pelvically, it affects the brain, and it affects the areas of the brain where this is happening. So it's very important to start to recognize sexuality and psychology, they're not separate. They're really not separate. And that's what my PhD was on, was looking at the psychosexual health of a human being and what the impact is, and the fact that they're inseparable. Yeah.
Wow.